Players gather to cast powerful spells, some of the oldest and most powerful in the history of Magic the Gathering. Chain Lightning, Fire Blast, Flame Rift, and many others, some of which aren't even red. Battling head-to-head in brutal combat, they all have one thing in common: to uphold their legacy in the search for eternal glory.
The Eternal Glory podcast is sponsored by Cardboard Live, BoshNRoll on YouTube, ThrabenU University, and theepicstorm.com.
Whatever time it is for you, welcome to another episode of Eternal Glory. This is episode 20, which we've dubbed the Flourishing Metagame because, well, we couldn't come up with a better name. And we want to talk about Carpet of Flowers, as well as some awesome new decks that are seeing play in Legacy. I'm Phil Gallagher, joined by Bryant Cook and Brian Coval. How are you all doing tonight?
Hold the fucking phone, Phil. What's wrong with the title I came up with?
Listen, everyone. So I'll be the voice of reason here. Phil came up with an absurd title that was like 4.5 pages long that Bryant nixed and came up with a terrible title that we met in the middle with this passable one. So nobody's happy, which is the sign of a good compromise.
So everyone's doing great. Happy to hear it.
I'm doing pretty well. Like I mentioned last episode, I thought that supporting local comic book shops in this time where they're probably not getting a lot of money would be a nice thing to do. So I actually gave $130 to a local comic book shop. They even delivered the comic book so I wouldn't have to go. It was terrific. Got a lot of Image and DC comic books. I don't read much Marvel, but I've only read one of them, Oblivion Song. I love that series. Check it out. It's pretty great.
Been watching anything fun to pass the time?
Yeah, I binged all of Tiger King yesterday, and I was hooked on season 3 of Ozark. I watched it all in one day.
I am watching the exact same things. I beasted through Tiger King, and I'm like 6 or 7 episodes into Ozark right now, and I appreciate Netflix dropping the fire when we're all stuck at home right now.
Let me tell you, Ozark only gets better.
Yeah, I'm really excited that Ruth Langmore is just on a tear this season. Like, there's no spoilers. Like, I'm not even done. There's not much I can spoil, but like in season 1 of Ozark, I was like, Ruth Langmore is the new Boyd Crowder. And I need a good gangster, like a hillbilly gangster in my life. And I'm really glad that Ruth is stepping up into that role for me since Justified went off the air a few years ago.
In college, I don't even know if I want to tell this story. I ended up in a police station, and when I was released, I ended up talking to one of the cops about Justified while drunk for about an hour. It was terrific.
That show's great.
But so something that drove me crazy this week is I ordered 2 signed baseballs. I have like 16 signed baseballs on my desk, and I wanted a couple more. I figured like with the economy dropping, I'd pick up a couple from eBay, whatever. I found a few that were really good prices. One of them was like literally $22 shipped for like a reasonably hard to get ball.
What's a good price for a signed baseball? I have no connection to this market. Give us some scale.
So I get a signed baseball every year from my fiance for my birthday, and she usually spends about $150 for a reasonably high-tiered ball. This ball I got for $22 from a guy that was like a 3-time All-Star.
So what is the high tier? Is it like the quality of the ball or the quality of the sig or like who signed it? All of the above?
The signature.
Right.
And the
are any of these game balls or are they like fresh out of the box signed?
The one that I bought is actually a game ball, which I don't have too many game balls. This will be my 3rd. But it came packaged super well, and I was really excited about it. And then the other one that I actually spent slightly more on was $35 shipped. This is not an exaggeration. Came in a hefty Ziploc bag with a printing label on it. And I was like, what? And I messaged the person through eBay, and they're just like, yeah, this is how I do my business. He's like, I've shipped over 200 signed baseballs. No one's ever complained.
Wow.
But it doesn't mean...
Brian, do you understand that this object is meant to be hurled at 70 miles an hour, then hit with a stick? It's going to be okay.
I don't know. I'm not happy about it. But like Phil, I can see Phil's scruffy beard. I've got a really bad quarantine beard going on right now. Then I probably need a haircut. I'm getting really close
Man,
to
he's
letting
so much
anyone cut my
fuzzier than
hair.
I've ever seen him. You just want to go up and, like, pet him.
Oh, I don't. I want to run away. I'm in the opposite. My work finally, after spending 2 weeks getting the gears turning, is at least somewhat operational in its online capacity. So I've been getting seen by my coworkers this week for the first time, and I had to like trim everything up. So I have the opposite of a quarantine beard. I have a working on camera trim.
I record looking like this. I usually have a blanket draped over me too. I've embraced the comfort.
I mean, I haven't worn anything except a hoodie and PJ pants in 3 weeks, so I'm also embracing the comfort, but I am not comfortable when I look raggedy. So self-care means things to different people. It's all good.
Phil, you have a pretty like special stream coming up, right?
I do. I'm really looking forward to it. I'm streaming with Rich Callie this weekend, who recently took down the super preliminary, or whatever they're calling it these days, with Rug Delver. And I'm really looking forward to that because, like, I am so not a Delver person. I totally respect it as an archetype. I think it's usually one of the best things you can be doing, but it's just not my style. So I'm really looking forward to having, like, guidance from someone who is just at the top of their class.
Rich Callie also top-aided the 323 Legacy Challenge, so it was back-to-back large finishes for Rich, who's a very skilled player. I actually faced Rich at a Star City Classic in Syracuse. We both lost round 1, and I sat across from Rich for round 2, and I said, Rich, beat me so I can go home. And he's like, I kind of want to go home myself. I get home, spend the rest of the day doing whatever, and at night I checked, and Rich actually took down the whole event. So, unfortunately, Rich had to stay and play out the rest of that, but
That
Rich
sucks.
is a very skilled wizard.
Yeah, it sucks for Rich that he had to be there all day.
Otherwise, on my end, things are going pretty well. I've been doing a lot of side magic stuff. I had 2 tutoring sessions this week. I did a Death and Taxes tutoring session with someone, and then I helped someone with kind of like a deck doctor type scenario. They were working with sort of a 12-post brew that they wanted some help with, and that was a lot of fun. And I also had a lot of fun playing a Storm Herald deck. So that's the 3/2 haste that lets you bring back an enchantment from your graveyard when you cast it. So I was trying to build my own Eldrazi using Eldrazi Conscription and this little thing, and it was super hilarious. Beat TES a few times. You know, deck's not good or anything. We certainly won't have an entire section in our podcast today about how good that deck is, since it loses to Storm Herald.
Yeah, I mean, that's an important part of the metagame. Stompy is crushing things, and Storm Herald is a 3-drop threat. Anything is live at this point.
That one's on YouTube if anyone wants to have a good time and some hilarious laughs. I put an Eldrazi Conscription on a Grizzlebrand, if that gives you anything about, like, the shenanigans that is that stream.
So if we're done with TES digs, maybe we can get into the feedback section.
Whoa. I have some updates still I want to talk about. So, I was running out of things to do last week. Like, I mean, I have Magic Online, so there's always something to do. But I was like, what else can I do in my home? And a lot of my friends talk about video games a lot, which is not a thing that I'm super into. But, like, I have certainly played video games in my life, and I like them. But I'm not, like, a video gamer, as it were. So I was going to buy a Switch. But then I realized that, remember that Eureka I talked about in the last cast that I just like tilt bought to like make sure I could play Omnitel in real life? That cost the same amount as a Switch. So I didn't, so that money was gone. But I did have a shocking realization that the like high-end gaming laptop I purchased just earlier this year to record Magic Online leagues with can also play games. To my shock. So, and I learned that a lot of games that I really like are available on PCs. So, as someone who's literally never in my life been a PC gamer, I'm now a PC gamer. I'm about 50 hours into Borderlands, and I've had the game for 8 days. So, we're doing it over here.
Hashtag just quarantine things.
Yep, I put in a week of work in on Pandora and neighboring planets.
I've been resisting the urge to buy Animal Crossing. I'm trying to use this time as a way to like get through my game queue, which has been slowly growing since Christmas. So I'm gonna do some damage there, and then move on to total addiction.
Yeah, that's smart. A lot of my friends, I just see like the stacks of unopened games that are like $60 each or whatever a game costs these days, just like still shrink wrapped on their desk, and like they're playing the new game, and the ones that are still in the wrappers are like 3 games ago, and they're never gonna do it. Like games these days are all like open world, and there's so much to do, and like you're never gonna like put down a new game for an old game once you're in the world.
I also have an addiction to roguelites, so that's a problem in terms of playing other games. And I have like, I don't know, probably between 400 and 600 hours into Binding of Isaac, and like Dead Cells and Slay the Spires have very high numbers as well. So they're so good. All right, so let's talk about feedback.
All right, so the first bit of feedback is from Chris Glade in the Leaving a Legacy Facebook group. 10 out of 10 can relate to the fact that every agency I've worked for tests emails for Outlook 2003 because some dumb margin of the populace still uses it. I only included this because I was so happy that someone else experiences my pain at work. So thank you for being someone else that works in email web marketing, Chris. I appreciate you.
I gotta jump in on this. Like the technology things that I've seen out of my coworkers these past few days that we've been working online again. Oh my God. Like the people who you think are smart, you're just like, why can't you figure this out? Like we have to use doxy.me, which is like a medical telehealth platform because we work in HIPAA and FERPA with special ed. So everything has to be locked up tight. And the way you use doxy.me is that like the practitioner, who is me, has a waiting room, and you send a link and they click the link and they just pop into your waiting room. That's it. That's all you have to do as the client. Click the link. And we have so many people who just cannot navigate this. Like I've had so many meetings just push back like 10, 15 minutes. They're like, oh, I can't figure it out. Can we use Zoom instead? It's like, no, we can't because Zoom isn't FERPA compliant. So literally, no, you need to figure out how to click this link. And it's insane. It's insane. I don't know how anyone is alive.
We have a lot of people out there in the world who are sort of being thrown into the deep end of the swimming pool for the first time and just like being forced to learn things that they've never had to do before.
Right.
And if you're one of those people, good luck.
Right. And you like get to see this like other side of your coworkers where they're communicating via text for the first time. We're in like group chats and stuff on like Microsoft Teams is like the platform we're using, and everyone's in a group text. So like people, this person who you thought was reasonable, you see ending every sentence with like 4 punctuation marks. They're just like exclamation, 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 exclamation. And it's like, bro, like, okay. It's like, yeah, I can be ready at 3, 4 exclamation points. How excited are you for this meeting? Just chill out.
So the next one we got was from Keterum Consejo 85 on Reddit, who said, it was really interesting to hear your description of the corona situation in the US right now. Reminded me a lot of how we treated the situation in Europe last month. But now even talking about potential upcoming local events would be unheard of here. We just declared a lockdown for anything non-essential and work, with police checking on why you are outside. So friend, we're just catching up to you now. That's what's starting to happen here. I know Virginia is in effectively lockdown until I think June 10th. Things in North Carolina have slowed down until at least the end of next month as of right now. How are things where you two are at?
We are on like shelter in place, but we don't quite have the cops checking everyone where they're going. Like we're still allowed to be outside, like just taking walks for exercises and stuff. We don't like need a real reason to be outside. But I was at the park this weekend and it was like a beautiful sunny 70-degree day. It was like the first glimpse of spring, and like the park was just packed, and there were cops rolling around just like checking on groups, making sure they weren't mingling too closely. Like we saw this one group of just these like Yinzer boomers who there were like 4 trucks, like all in pickup trucks. They had like parked all along the end of the parking lot, and each like family pod of like 3 to 5 people were sitting right behind their own truck, and like with like one parking space in between each of the trucks. And there were clearly 4 families hanging out here. They were all talking to each other. They all had lawn chairs, but like, I guess like the space of one parking space is like enough for them to tell the cop, no, we're not having a gathering. Like, I don't know. It seemed kind of weird. There was also a like 20-person basketball game, like a full 5-on-5. Both teams had a deep bench, and I don't think all those dudes live together. I just don't believe it. So where was the cop on that one? So either the cop just didn't see that occurring, or we're not at like, you guys seriously need to disperse level yet. But it horrified me to walk past it.
My favorite one was the Florida church, the mega church that held a service this weekend with 1,000+ people in there. I believe the pastor was arrested for holding that. So people are really starting to crack down and take the situation seriously, which I really, really appreciate.
Yeah, I read that there's a woman that might do prison time because she knew she had coronavirus and flew back to China from Massachusetts. So it's definitely starting to get more strict up here. Locally to me, a lot of people are starting to freak out because using like the local subreddit for Syracuse, it's being discovered that like Wegmans employees are found having coronavirus, or Lowe's employees. Like, if you go to an essential place, at some point during this pandemic, someone will, obtain coronavirus, because at some point people that have the disease need to eat, and they have to go to Wegmans, or someone they know has to go to Wegmans, and they're coming in somewhat close contact with the person with the virus. So like, at some point, grocery stores are just like the worst possible place to be because everyone has to go to them eventually. So I'm not shocked that a Wegmans employee ended up having it. That said, we're trying to only go grocery shopping every 2 to 3 weeks. We've gone once, like 2 weeks ago, and we can probably still go like another week and a half.
Went to the store tonight, and we're good for 2 weeks or so.
Yeah, I'm trying to like plan out meals in advance, which is not a thing that I normally do. I normally have like base foods, like I'll just have like 10 pounds of chicken, 5 pounds of beef, a bunch of pasta, like whatever, like the bases, the rice, the beans. And then like on a night by night basis, I'll just swing by the store for whatever spices I need to make the version of chicken I want that night. And that's obviously not a tenable lifestyle. I also eat a lot of fresh produce, like fruits and vegetables I'm really into, and it sucks that you have to like buy ones that are going to last a little longer, or just go without for a few days at a time, because you can't swing by the store every 3 days for your fresh vegetables. And that sucks, but like, I'm adjusted to it. But it's definitely a lifestyle change. And when I do go to the grocery store, the store provides like sanitizer wipes to wipe down your cart before you go in. I just take like 3 of them and I put it along the entire like handle of the cart, like putting down like toilet paper around a toilet seat in public. And I just leave it there for the duration of my time. And every time I touch anything, I just re-wipe my hands. And I don't really have skin left on my hands at the end of any given grocery trip, but I'm fairly confident I don't have the coronavirus. So that's nice.
Another bit of feedback we got was lame that Phil got brushed off regarding Spell Pierce and Blue-Green Omnitel, as he was correct, and it's not just a fringe card or an old metagame card. A quick glance at MTG Top 8 shows it. From Eltron on Reddit. Well, I disagree. For one, MTG Top 8 is not a reliable source for results, in my opinion. While they do have some paper events and not just online events, because, they include everything, they also count like 8-man locals and smaller events, which I feel like isn't really worth sharing to, the larger metagame share. Because, like, who's to say my local 8% event isn't for Goblin players and all of a sudden I win every week by playing Humility or something. So I don't personally think MTG Top 8 is that reliable. I think Goldfish is a much better indicator of what the actual metagame looks like. And if you look at MTG Goldfish, the last 8 results, there's 0 Spell Pierce, and then there's a couple that do contain Spell Pierce, but it's like a one of. So I would consider that to be fringe. It's not stock by any means, in my opinion. I don't know if the two of you have anything to say on this.
I would like to confirm we were completely right in brushing off Phil.
So one of the most recent deck lists was Callum Smith's deck list. He top 16 with the deck in one of the events that we're going to talk about later today. I forget which one. And he indeed did not have Spell Pierce. So like it's definitely something that should be on your radar. And if you have the possibility of like playing around a Spell Pierce at a critical moment, maybe do so. But, you know, maybe don't be playing around it every game.
That's a very fair take on that, Phil. I think Delver's going to have a rough time when Euro picks up in play from Robin. I can't say his last name. Svenskin. I'm not Russian. I can't do this. What is it?
Svensson. You're working too hard. Two syllables.
Well,
Svensson.
it was in the Leaving a Legacy group. Thank you for responding, Robin. I actually tend to agree with you. It's weird because like Delver's by far the best deck in Legacy right now. Rug Delver is everywhere. But I think as the metagame shapes out, like we're still adjusting to the breach banning, and I think anyone that would disagree is a little bit silly. And I think as it shakes out, we're going to return to more 4-color pile decks. I see these bigger decks becoming more and more popular as there's more tools being printed to beat Delver. The new Titan deck is a good example of like a big deck that goes over both the 4-color decks and can beat Delver pretty well. But I also expect to see more decks like what Anurag has been playing on stream. The 4-color pile decks without red have been picking up, and those tend to crush Delver. I don't really know what else to say there. I know that we're going to talk about Carpet of Flowers, which is a pretty effective card against Delver of Secrets, and that's been picking up recently. While Delver might lose metagame percentages, I don't think Delver will ever go away or be a bad choice to play. It's just not going to continue to be by far the best deck, I think. It's just going to be, you know, low tier 1, mid tier 1, that sort of thing.
Has Delver even been considered a tier 2 deck since its printing? I don't think it has been.
I think there was a point right before the Narset Karn printing, before War of the Spark, before Dreadhorde came out, where its metagame share was at an all-time low.
So what is that, like 7%?
I'd have to go back and look, but I remember it just being like an incredibly small amount to the point where I cut all the extra sideboard empties from my board because I didn't have to respect Delver anymore.
Yeah. But all in all, that should be very telling that like Delver is good, has been good, will probably always be good until the power creep prints something better than Delver.
Delver is an atrocity. Blue should not have had the most aggressive creature printed of all time.
Can we just take a moment of silence for Leovold not being, you know, like an Abzan card? Thank you.
Also, Snapcaster Mage probably should have been red since it's literally just recoup.
I don't know. If I were Thiago Saporito and I won the Magic Invitational and they made a Magic card for me and they made it a red card, I would be furious. Like if that was me, if I was just on that card and I gave the text and I was like 2/1 flash, give something flashback, blue, and they're like, okay, but it's red. Everything else passes. It's like, nope, no deal. Don't put my face on that card.
To be honest, if Snapcaster was red, I think it would still see play.
Well, there is the pirate fella who has seen some play, at least as far back as Modern. I don't know if it's cracked into Legacy yet.
Robber
the
Rich,
Dire Fleet,
right?
No, Dire Fleet Daredevil.
Oh, that
I
one.
believe is
Yep.
the name.
Yeah, I've played
Yeah,
more of
first
that
strike.
card than I care to admit.
Yeah, it's a very Phil card.
Ouch.
I do know that it was seeing some humans play for a little bit.
Yeah, it's dope in humans. I viled it in and cast Cryptic Command out of my opponent's graveyard once to win a game. That was fucking nice.
The screenshots that you can get while playing that card are like absolute top tier juicy.
Absolutely, yeah.
So the last bit of feedback was from Zach Faden on Twitter. Thank you, Zach, for replying to us on Twitter. We greatly appreciate it. We don't usually get a whole lot there, so you're a special person. At LALMTG and at Eternal Glory Pod, really enjoyed both of your casts, but 2 hours each is killing me even at 1.5x. And Leaving a Legacy responded with, you can always just skip ours. Zach, we agree with Leaving a Legacy. Just make sure to skip them and always listen to Eternal Glory podcast. Thank you.
And this is Eternal Glory. eternal means forever. This isn't like a little bit of glory. Like, we're going to talk till we're done talking, and I appreciate your listenership. Please don't quit. But, like, go ahead up to 2x. It'll be like 3 Mickey Mouses talking about Legacy. And who doesn't want that? You could include your family, your kids.
It's kind of like strength training, right? Like, you have to start out on the lower difficulties, get those small weights in, and then you can be ready for the real thing.
Well, what we needed to be doing is recording it at 2x. Like, we just talk twice as fast as we normally would, so then when they listen to 2x, it's actually 4, and then it's only like 15 minutes long. And you get all the same information. It's like steroids for your brain.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
We'll do that next week. Stick around.
All right, so I suppose we should actually get to the meat and bones of this podcast.
Fine.
If we have to. So the first thing we want to talk about today is sort of a love letter to both TES and Carpet of Flowers. So, I don't know. Which one of us knows the most about that deck to start things off?
That would be me.
All right, go for it.
So, no, Bryant, go ahead. Take it away.
First, I would like an apology from Phil for his prior comments about the Epic Storm to kick off this show. Phil, I'll be waiting. Really, though, I finally got back into playing Magic Online. Like I mentioned in the previous episode, I was doing a lot of office remodeling and stuff like that, but recently I've really been back into creating YouTube content. I know Brian does that quite a bit as well. In the last few weeks, I've uploaded 2 complete leagues to YouTube, my Legacy Super Qualifier, and a Legacy Challenge. So 4 events pretty much have all gone up on YouTube. And I've been running the Epic Storm version 9.6 in these videos. It's been incredible. I can't emphasize that enough. I know that my results in those events weren't exactly stellar, but let me get to my full point, and maybe you'll agree, maybe you think it's bad. I don't really care. But the big thing about this list is that it's had a very improved Delver of Secrets matchup compared to the pre-Breach Epic Storm. Back then, I was running pretty hot at over 70% for about 110 matchups. And recently, it's been even better with this newer list. So I'm 15-3 against Delver variants with 9.6. To put it in perspective, the pre-Breach / early Breach era, I was 60-61, which is about 500. The big difference maker here, as Phil alluded to, would be Carpet of Flowers. I know Phil also loves this card. I was very skeptical at first, and Alex McKinley sort of just like browbeated me into trying this card again, because I tried it for a few leagues, wasn't super impressed, and then Alex really pushed me to keep on trying this card because his results were so good. And sure enough, Carpet really impressed me after I continued to play it against Delver decks. It allows you to play through their soft counter spells, so Daze, Pierce, and Fluster, which means that they really only have 6 meaningful cards in their deck, usually about 4 Force of Will and 2 Force of Negation. So once you negate those softer counters, you can really start to pressure the Delver deck because they no longer have this position on top of a hill against you. It's much more of a fair fight where you're probably even ahead. And you can cast Echo of Aeons the hard way from lands in your Carpet trigger or your Ad Nauseam. Carpet of Flowers also fixes your mana, so instead of fetching for a basic island that you can't use to cast Rite of Flame or Dark Ritual or even Veil of Summer, Carpet does it all. And an important thing here is that Carpet of Flowers is not an artifact. It's an enchantment, so it doesn't get hit by Collector Oof or Norod. It helps cast Abrupt Decay and empty the Wardens through those cards, which is probably its biggest advantage to me, is that your opponent plays these haymakers that shut off your entire deck, and all of a sudden you have the mana to answer them.
I just want to cut in for a second and say how good enchantments are. This is something that I've been a big believer in for, I don't know, maybe 3 to 5 months now. And it's so difficult for a lot of decks to actually answer enchantments. So things like Choke, a lot of times once they hit play, they're just there. And a lot of times your opponents aren't prepared to deal with them. And I think that's a huge advantage for TES here.
Yeah, I'll go a little deeper from the blue side, from the side of the person who's usually trying to find the answer to the choke. I'll usually have like 0 to 3 answers in my deck for something like choke. If I'm on miracles, I might have a council's judgment. I might have boarded in a disenchant. I've played unexpectedly absent in my life. I don't think it's good anymore, but you usually have some white card that can answer it, but that's about it. And if it's a deck that's also pressuring your mana, I know Phil's a fan of Rashad Port and Wasteland and Blood Moon and all of that horse shit, Trinosphere. So if you have 2 planes in your deck, 2 basic planes, and you're choked and one of them gets ghost quartered, you can't Council's Judgment anymore. It's just gone. So the enchantments are serious business, and they need to be respected.
While we're on the topic, I was going to get to this in a second, but Carpet of Flowers being an enchantment means it's not hit by Oko, Thief of Crowns, which is one of the biggest reasons to play the card. It's actually very similar to, you'll notice right now a lot of blue decks are picking up Sylvan Library for a very similar reason as Carpet of Flowers. It's just really difficult to answer enchantments right now. But the difference between Carpet of Flowers and Sylvan Library is effects like Oko and Uro right now create accidental life gain or beneficial life gain from cards that probably didn't need it. So with Sylvan Library, you can pay it life, then start to gain that life back, and then later on in the game, get an extra card from the Sylvan Library once again. So it's a little interesting if you look at how power creep works with older cards like Sylvan Library, and plus being an enchantment, it's very difficult to answer. I think it creates something we haven't seen in a very long time.
As follow-up there, do you know how bad it feels to Swords to Plowshare and Uro when they have a Sylvan Library in play?
Wow, that's like casting Divination targeting them.
It's so bad. And it's one of the only ways to get rid of that bugger forever, too. He just keeps coming back from the graveyard if you give them time. So you're like, all right, I'll exile him.
You know what feels even worse? If that Uro attacks every turn. So... you did a good job exiling it, but yeah, that's the classic Swords to Plowshares isn't always free. Like when you Swords to Plowshares a turn 2 Merit Lage or whatever, it's all right, I'm not dead, but you're at 40. Shit, time to start figuring this out.
I'll attack for 2. Your go.
So yes. Previously, Path to Exile would have been the answer there, but nowadays with Astrolabe, everyone's running tons of basics because they want to be able to play their Mana Fixer. So Path isn't even good anymore.
Yeah, and Jace the Mind Sculptor and Monastery Mentor also largely don't care about life totals. Monastery Mentor can't kill literal infinite, but it can kill an extremely large amount. I've plowed 3 Merit Lages in a game, then just killed my opponent from 80 with a Mentor once the coast was clear. That's not a big deal. And Jace the Mind Sculptor doesn't care at all about their life total, obviously. So the blue decks, if they're built correctly, can still win. You'd have to have a pretty big Entreat the Angels to kill an opponent from 80, but it can be done, especially with Mystic Sanctuary, just firing it back in every turn. More and more Angels. So it's worth the cost, but it does feel bad sometimes, real bad.
But Carpet of Flowers feels real good, and it's kind of my pick for one of the most underplayed cards in Legacy right now, relative to how good I think it is. I think way more decks should be jamming it in than they are. I've been super impressed on the green mid-range side of things. Bryant's been impressed on the combo side. I forget which pilot it was, but right before I went live to start recording this, I saw one of the Ant players posting that they had Carpet of Flowers in their sideboard as well.
It's also in the blue-green Omni deck.
Yeah, my opinion of that card in the past couple months, when Bant Miracles won that GP in Europe, it had a copy of Carpet of Flowers in the board, and I was like, that's weird, I'm cutting that immediately when I try this deck. And then over the last couple months, the more I play with and against the card, I'm just like, okay, I do want that. I think I want 2. Why don't I just have 4 in this Omnitel deck? That card is just so dumb. And it's just, a couple months ago also, my opponent would cast a Carpet of Flowers, and it's well, do I Force Will that? I don't think so. And then 2 turns later, I just absolutely die because of Carpet of Flowers. I can't dance around everything they're doing with my Force Will because they have so much more mana than me. It's a fair blue mirror breaker. It's a it lets combo jump ahead of the blue decks on resources. Like it does so much. Like it's just been hiding there in Magic the Gathering since Urza Saga, and it's suddenly being respected.
From the blue-green Omni side, it's interesting the fact that if you're somehow your show and tells get surgical, you're able to hardcast your Gristlebrand's and Omniscience, and I think that's a secret mode that a lot of people don't understand. Is like you're not actually dead when your show and tells get surgical, which is a pretty huge deal. I know that you're playing the Eurekas, but not everyone opts to play them for some reason, and it's just another backdoor to doing that.
Yeah, a friend of mine, Nick Cummings, he's been working on various show and tell Omni decks, whether they're good or bad, for years. And he's on a bug build, and he has one Cabal Ritual in his wish board, like Cunning Wish for Cabal Ritual to cast Grizzlebrand, in case you need to do that. And like, that sounds a lot harder than just putting Carpet of Flowers into play. Like, you don't have to add black to your deck, and you get this card that's good good most of the time, instead of only good in that one weird situation.
Yeah. So, going back to the previous episode, I mentioned how I was testing a sideboard land, and I saw that it slightly improved my Delver matchup. Slightly improved might have been 8% to a couple percent, maybe. The Carpet of Flowers has dramatically improved my Delver matchup to the point where I thought I was unfavored to now I think I'm favored against Delver decks. And I think part of that is Carpet of Flowers, like Brian mentioned, really changes how games are played from the Delver Secret side. So they either have to Force of Will it on turn 1, or they start Force of Willing, because the way that current TS is built is that you can just run out Wishclaw Talismans and Burning Wish and empty the Warrens and Carpets, and eventually you're going to run them, because your deck is so bomb heavy now, that they're going to run out of hard counters for your bombs. And that's you're pretty much overloading them until they have a Tarmogoyf that you don't care about in their hand, or they have the wrong counter spell. For example, Spell Snare's been picking up, but Spell Snare doesn't counter Carpet. It doesn't counter Echo of Aeons or Empty the Warrens or Ad Nauseam. So you just find what they have and then you beat it with something else. And also, none of these cards get hit by Pyroblast or Red Elemental Blast, which almost everyone boards in. So that's one way that Carpet beats Delver decks. The other way is it creates a free Mox every turn, or Soul Ring, or a Black Lotus every single turn against the deck full of the soft counter magic, like I mentioned. And you just get so far ahead on mana that you're able to punish them pretty badly. And a lot of Delver players will just sit there with fetch lands in play. But if the Delver deck's not playing threats, you're winning that game anyway, because they're a tempo-based deck, and if the tempo deck isn't applying pressure, it's going to crumble eventually if you just don't cave first. I don't know if you guys have anything to add on there.
I do. I don't think it's just Delver, though. I think Carpet of Flowers changes the texture of basically any blue matchup. So you get to drop your hate cards earlier if it's a blue combo deck. You get to improve the speed of cards like Green Sun Zenith, and you get to accelerate something out like a Collector Oof or a Primeval Titan even out sooner than you normally would. You get to use mana sinks like Clues from Tireless Tracker, and I think it just totally warps games around that card. And I'm just waiting for all of these blue mid-range Uro Oko decks to start playing Carpet of Flowers for the mirrors.
Yeah, a lot of them are already there. In the Oko mirror, if I have turn 1 Carpet and you don't, that game is over. On turn 3, when I get to cast my Oko with Spell Pierce and a removal spell backup or whatever, and you have to tap out for Oko on your turn, we're done. It's over.
The amount of power you get from that one card is absurd. So if we take Aether Vial as the maybe roughest parallel, in that over time Aether Vial generates you more and more and more mana, mana in air quotes. This is a card that generates more and more mana over time, but it's actual mana that you can use for whatever you want.
Yeah, no air quotes required. And there's no decision. It's all right, I'll tick my vial up to 4 in case I rip the Palace Jailer, and then you draw Recruiter that turn, and you're just tilt. But Carpet doesn't care. Go ahead, take a draw, then we'll decide what we're going to do with this thing.
So it's also pretty interesting that you can play it in your first main phase and then use Carpet in your second main phase. And and it comes back to I created a section called Weird Interactions. So one of them is with Leovold, Emissary of Trust. If you don't, for some reason, you choose to not use your carpet trigger in your first main phase and then go to your second main phase and trigger carpet, your opponent actually gets 2 Leovold triggers because it targets your opponent each phase, and then Leovold will trigger and they'll draw a card. So it's actually like a little bit risky against the black, green, blue decks. But I also think like against those decks, it's interesting from a combo perspective, or at least TES, because I like to board out my Moxes and Fast Mana in that matchup and keep my Rite of Flames and Carpets and effects that get better in the long game. But at the same time, those decks often have Bayou and Basic Forest, and sometimes even like Gilded Goose or something else. So Carpet isn't always reliable there, but it's still pretty good against the decks that sometimes play like Hymnatorok. So it puts you in a weird position. So it's not amazing all the time. And a second weird situation is if you're an insane person, like you have to be like Phil Gallagher level of crazy, you could technically side it in against the Titan deck, because with Dryad, all their lands become islands, and then you're going to trigger your carpet and get like 8 blue mana on turn 4.
All I'm going to say, Bryant, is that I have a note here on my desk that says that exact thing from when I thought of that previously. So, guilty as charged.
But don't be like the person from the Twitter screenshot this week. Do not play Dryad and then follow it up with Choke. That is not good for you.
So interesting extra layer. If you didn't look closely at that screenshot, that's not a Dryad of the Elysian Grove. That's an Elk. And the Elked Dryad still turns all your lands into every land. Because of layers. I can't explain it any more than that. It's one of those because that's how it is things. But if you turn an elk, or if you turn Dryad of the Elysian Grove into an elk, your opponent can't play 2 lands anymore, but they do still have the prismatic lands. Like everything is
it
everything.
The same with Magus?
Yes. If you elk a Magus of the Moon, things are still mountains. Sorry.
So Phil put a note here. Is it time to revisit Enchantress? I know that the two of you talked about Enchantress last week.
I will be playing it on stream twice, either next week or the following week. Multiple people have donated to see it, kind of thinking the same thing that I have. I think enchantments are super well positioned. I know Julian played a few leagues with Enchantress. He was trying out a really interesting build that had Chrome Moxes to try and like bridge the early turns of the deck, because like before you get an Enchantress into play, you don't do too much. And that was kind of a cool take in addition to the normal mana ramp. But I am all about trying Enchantress where I just main deck Carpet of Flowers, if I'm being completely honest.
During the Miracles heyday, there was talk about playing Carpet main deck over Rite of Flame back during Top Miracles. We did it for a couple weeks, but Legacy is just too diverse for that to actually be good.
I think it works in Enchantress, though, because at the worst, like, at some point in the game, it's just 1 green mana, draw a card. And that's fine.
So I have a question for you, because the Enchantress players that I know in real life, they tend to claim that they prey on blue decks. If you're already preying on non-Delver blue decks, because they've said that, like, dealing with Delver Secrets decks is actually kind of difficult because of the pressure, plus counter magic can be an issue. But traditional base blue decks, if you're already favored, why would you want to play something like Carpet of Flowers?
I think that Enchantress is often, but not always, favored against blue decks. It's difficult for the blue decks to interact with things that you put in play, but sometimes you just die, right? Sometimes they just have the show and tell and you die. Sometimes they have the Delver and you don't find the Elephant Grass to buy time and you die.
Yeah, I can tell you from the blue side that playing against Enchantress, it's just like, have a counterspell ready on turn 2 and Mentor ready on turn 3, and you're going to win. And permutations of that, each turn the game goes on, I think things start to tilt towards Enchantress. But if you just like have a second counterspell, you can have your Mentor a turn later or whatever. But like, if you're able to have real pressure, like the Entreat the Angels builds are probably super dogs against Enchantress, but like if you have creatures that can actually get into play and deal damage, like Delver or Mentor, I think it's totally fine. You just have to know what matters, and you have to have it when they have it, basically. Like if you make the decision like, I'm going to tap out for this counterbalance or whatever on turn 2, and they sneak in and they Zenith for Enchantress the turn when you could have left a Spell Pierce, but you didn't, and then now Enchantress is in play, you're suddenly way behind. But like keeping Enchantress out of play with non-targeted removal or Force of Will, and then having real follow-up, I found that matchup to be largely positive, but I'm sure every Enchantress player just turned off their iPod or whatever in disgust when I said that, because it can totally get away. But
I also think Destiny Spinner is probably changing things as well.
Yes.
That card is super obnoxious, and I think it pairs very well with Carpet of Flowers, because Carpet of Flowers gives you extra mana that you can funnel into Destiny Spinner and just get your opponent dead with.
Yeah, Destiny Spinner is a huge game changer. If you can't just go like a Delver or whatever and then like daze their Enchantress's presence, you're gonna lose. Like if they have like turn 2 Destiny Spinner, turn 3 uncounterable Enchantress's presence, you lose.
The fact that the Green Suns are also more disgusting now because they also fetch a win condition instead of just an Enchantress also gives you more of a reason to want extra mana.
So the last thing on the docket for Carpet of Flowers, for me at least, is its overall impact on the Epic Storm. With my current list, version 9.6, I'm at 108 matches. I am currently 80-28, which is a little bit over 74%. When TS was doing super well pre-breach, when it was on the top of MTG Goldfish with version 8.5, at 110 matches, I was at a dead even 70%. So it's currently 4% better. So that means Carpet of Flowers in my sideboard is worth roughly 4%. And I know that like metagames change and things aren't always the same, but think about the numbers that I gave you where I was 60-61, and then now I'm largely favored against Delver variants so far. So Carpet of Flowers is actually probably worth more than 4%, and then the rest of it is like my deck being worse against other things, but overall my win percentage has gone up 4. So like roughly you're pretty lucky if you ever get 4% out of any given sideboard card, in my opinion at least. I don't know if Brian will agree with that, but its overall impact cannot be like overstated enough. Like the card's just amazing. And that's why I'm not letting my results from those 2 events that we're going to talk about in the next section really get to me, because if you're doing well consistently, eventually you'll get big event results.
All right, let's go ahead and use that as our pivot point then to talk about recent tournament results and kind of the way the metagame is shaking up, what decks are sort of moving into the spotlight now that Breach is gone. So the super preliminary, super special, awesome IQ Pro Tour, maybe it's called a Pro Tour, who knows, qualifier thing that happened recently was a lot of fun. We had a ton of people playing in that. I played in that, and I went 6-3 with Red Prism. I beat Loam and 5 blue decks, and I narrowly lost to Sneak and Show and Lands and got bullied by Grixis Delver once. This is not the deck that I wanted to play in the event, but the event happened on a work day, and I could justify taking 10 minutes to play a Red Prism match every hour and just like work an hour or 2 longer, and like that was totally fine by my moral compass, but I couldn't play Loam without taking the day off. That just was not reasonable for me to do given circumstances.
So Brian, how did you do in that event?
Well, I can't play in that because I'm on quite an adventure here. I won a Grand Prix at the end of 2019, which qualified me for the first regional Pro Tour and the first Pro Tour final. And by showing up at the Pro Tour final, I would have queued for the second regional Pro Tour. But now the Pro Tour final and the second regional Pro Tour have both been canceled. And I don't know what I'm queued for anymore. Cyrus Cormangill also is a second half of 2019 GP winner, and he's been like actively harassing Magic Esports on our behalf, us being GP winners from the second half of the year. And he has told me we have sort of like hand wave rolling queues until the PT system is back online. So I don't think I'm allowed to play in these things. And I'm not going to risk losing all the queues that I might have by just YOLOing it. And really, I'm okay with that because I hate playing full day tournaments on Magic Online. Like Phil just said, like 10 minutes every hour to blast out with Red Prison or whatever is fine, but like that's not the kind of deck I play. I recorded the Modern Challenge last weekend with Teamer Uroza, and I went close to the full 50 minutes every round for 9 rounds. I didn't eat for 10 hours. I was recording, so I was just talking for 10 hours. I got like 6 hours of video. It's a robust video. If you're interested in that, go check it out. But like, I don't want to do that ever again. Like a league, like 5 rounds at my pace is exactly where I want to be with Magic Online. So I don't have any results to report in these bigger tournaments because I hate them.
Fair enough. So I also played in the super preliminary qualifying event, and like Phil, I went 6-3. I lost my first round to a bad matchup, won out until the second to last round where I lost a tight match to Delver, and then I lost my last round to, I believe it was Eldrazi. And, you know, those are heartbreakers, being like you're 6-2. If you win, there's a good chance you top 16, and then you lose your last round. I ended up getting 20 or 33rd in the Super PTQ. So, like, I didn't even get published, which is kind of a bummer. But I was in 29th, and it actually happened the same exact thing in the Legacy Challenge. I was 29th going into the last round. I lost my first round to Reanimator, won out, lost to Eldrazi, and then I got paired up against Esper Hate Bears in my final round and lost to that, and ended up being below 32nd again. So bad breakers, they happen when you lose round one. You should try not to get paired against decks that are bad matchups in round one. You should probably just try to win your round ones from here on out. Some professional advice for you.
Yeah, the Magic Online tournament math when nobody can draw is just a totally different world. If you don't play on Magic Online, or if you only play on Magic Online, like going into those final rounds, I don't know what's happening. Like playing mostly live tournaments for me, where it's like, okay, we can count on these 4 people to ID, and then like this could happen, and like there's going to be a pair up here, but like nope, down and dirty. Everyone's playing every round. No scoops, no IDs. Everything's just above the board. I love it. I wish Real Magic worked that way too, but it's ruthless. Like when you're just like, all right, I'm at 11th going into this final round. I could win and like be somewhere between 8th and 20th. It's just like, what the hell is happening? Like, should I just go to bed? Should I save this hour? If I lose, I'm going to be 50th. Like, it's insane. And like the number of times I've like bubbled out of top 8 into no cash is just like absolutely brutal. But
I think that they should change it to be scaling prizes, because right now it's creating a lot of feel bads where there's 500 people signing up for these super qualifying events. Then if you don't top 32, you get nothing.
Agreed.
Like, it's pretty ridiculous.
Agreed. The modern challenge that I played, the one that I put like 10 hours of play into and just burned out my soul. Like, I was playing for top 16 in the last round, and I lost and fell into the top 64 somewhere. So I got like half my money's back for a day's work. Like, I did pretty good in that tournament. Like, I don't know. It just seems super stingy. Like, especially everyone's stuck at home. Like, things are up. Like, just a sliding pay scale would be all it takes to fix this. Or like, if min cash was at least your money back, just like give me my money back. We're gonna take half instead of all. Good job, buddy. Like, I'd rather get nothing than half my money back.
I think that's pretty fair. I don't, for the reasons that Phil mentioned, I don't think I'm going to be able to play the Super Qualifier this week. By the time this goes live, I think that it will have already passed, but being during a work day, I took last week off. I can't take back-to-back same days off just to play in a Magic Online event during the workday. I understand that I'm also playing a fast deck, but I work on the Mac side of my computer, and then you have to play on the PC side, so I'd have to be constantly rebooting every round, and it's just too much. I can't do that.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to get to play in this week's either. You know, I can make lesson plans ahead of time, but I have like actual face-to-face meetings. I have like Zoom meetings and such this week that I have to attend on Thursday.
Yeah, I'm getting used to the we don't have an online presence. This is all brand new to us at work, so nobody knows any sort of etiquette for it. And like, I can get an email at like 9 o'clock at night for a meeting at 8 a.m. And it's like, should I be checking my email all night? Should I be? But like, the answer to that is a hard no. But then on the other end, my workday would technically start at 7:30, which like, if I was getting myself up at my house when I have nowhere to be at my computer checking my email at 7:30, I would have seen that email in time for that meeting. But I've been sleeping until a solid like 9:30, 10, like for the last 3 weeks. Like nobody knows like where that goes. I was also just like taking a little break today. I was doing like a quick like half hour worth of Borderlands during my workday, and my team's call just started ringing. I was just like running through the desert on Pandora, and like I got a little pop-up notification. It's like doo-doo-doo, like my boss's boss was calling me for a video chat, just like with no warning at all. It's like, you're lucky I'm even at my computer. Let me shut this game down real quick. Jesus, is this how this is gonna work? Like, I mean, obviously I was playing a game, so I'm like a little guilty, but like we don't have nobody set out like code of conduct for this world, and there's no etiquette established, and it seems like anyone can email anyone at any time and expect a meeting to happen.
A great piece of advice that my principal gave to our entire staff before we left was, we don't expect you to be on at all times when you are working from home. That's not realistic. You need to take breaks. You need to go to the kitchen. You need to eat. You need to take care of your kids. Do the things that you need to do. If you need to change your schedule a little bit, just like do it, because this isn't anything like what you've ever done before.
Yeah, like that's where I am. Like I make sure that all of my work is done every day. And I'm definitely the type of person, I have been since, doing homework as a child, where it's like, if I don't have to do it yet, I probably won't. So like, I'm not going to get up at 7:30 to check my email just in case I've been invited to a meeting. And if I have to like make a PowerPoint, like making YouTube videos, like instructional trainings for parents, is just part of my job right now, which is cool because that's what I would do anyway. And like, I don't need to film that video during the workday. Like if I want to eat some dinner, relax, film it at 10:30 at night, and like that's more my speed. And like it's tough for me also to control, like my workday ends at 3:30, do not email me. But at the same time, I'll be up at 10 recording this video because that's what I want to do. So reconciling the boundaries for the people who aren't me and my own boundaries is definitely a new exercise.
I definitely felt guilty the first couple of days where I'm like, is this okay that I'm just like done? I feel like I've hit a stopping point for the day. Is it okay that I just take this half-hour break in the middle of the day because I'm burnt out? And then after a couple of days of doing it, I'm like, yeah, it's fine. And my average response time for emails is still just absolutely insane compared to my peers. So yeah, I feel pretty good about it.
Yeah, I'm definitely quicker on the chat response than anyone else, for sure. And it's exactly like you said. Like, I would have like a meeting from 10 to 11, and then I'd have another meeting at 12:30, and I'd just play like Borderlands for an hour and a half in between. I never get up. I'm still on my computer, but I just like tab into the meeting window off of the game window when it's time to do work. And that's been working pretty well. I'm into it.
All right, so why don't we dive into the results from the last few weeks? Let's start with the Legacy Challenge from March 23rd. Phil, why don't you take it away?
So there's a couple of different things. So let's start by talking about the winning deck, which was a Bug Zenith Oko deck, which I have dubbed 2019.deck, because it contains Oko, Brazen Borrower, Gilded Goose, Icefang Coatl, Plague Engineer, Questing Beast, Uro, Astrolabe, Collector Oof. I thought there was one more.
Force of
Veil
Negation.
Summer.
Force of
I
Negation.
missed Force of Negation,
Yep.
Yes. And like, holy crap, it's like all the good cards just jammed into one deck. Like, it's missing maybe like Urza and Karn, but most of the rest of the stuff is in there.
Can we talk about the one Arkham's Astrolabe in this deck?
It's beautiful.
This deck is going to be getting a lot cheaper with Modern Horizon drafts coming back to Magic Online. Right now, all the Modern Horizons cards are super expensive. Like, Force of Negation is like 80 tickets. And
Icefang
Brennan
Coatl's
6 is
like
still a
50.
ton too. Yeah. Plague Engineer's about 30 if I remember correctly. But all these are going to drop at least probably about half once the redrafts come out. So if you're someone looking to play a deck like Fish Duggery's first place finishing list, it will become cheaper for you.
I have a $500 loan account, which Card Hoarder has given me. They've sort of sponsored my stream. And last week was one of the first times where I couldn't play the 75 that I wanted to play because the deck was too expensive. And that's counting the cards that I already own on Magic Online. I just didn't play 2 Force of Negations in Food Chain because the rest of the deck had maxed out my loan account. So I'm super happy about this.
Yeah, the Moto economy is nuts. Like the post-arena world where it's just like Uro, $50, $200 to get a set of that guy. Brazen Bar were $50. Like, Modern Horizons obviously isn't on arena, but like it is a limited print set with high value mythics, and every single one is playable by design. So it's been tough to stay relevant. Like you know that like when Oko was just $80-$90, whatever he capped out at, and it was like, this card's going to get banned in 3 weeks, but I want to play Magic for the next 3 weeks, so I have to eat this. Especially as a content creator, it's just like, well, people want to see Oko decks. I guess I'm on the hook for $400 into Okos right now. Let's hope I can recoup some of that.
So if you look at the rest of the top 8 from March 23rd, it's almost exclusively Chalice of the Void decks, large creature decks, and then 2 Delver decks, one being Blue-Red. Actually, no, they're both Rug Delver. So you're seeing Eldrazi, you're seeing 4-color Loam, and then you're seeing Maverick, and then like another Zenith deck. You'll notice there's no combo here, no Death and Taxes style deck. It looks like Chalice of the Void this weekend was a very good choice. So was Green Sun Zenith. Even though 4-color Loam, some of them are moving away from it for Okos and some are still playing it. It's sort of 50-50 at the moment. But the second place list is actually doing both. Phil, you're more the expert here. What do you think?
So as an aside, I played Red Prison recently, and I keep thinking, this deck can't be that good right now. Oko is such a problem. And then I win like 70% of my matches anyway, just because like the general Chalice of the Void shells are so strong. And even in this world where Oko is like very, very good against Chalice, it just like turns the Chalice into an elk and you get to start casting your cards again. I still think the Chalice decks are very strong against a lot of what the format has to offer. So I'm really not surprised to see things like Loam and Eldrazi in particular floating to the top of a lot of these events.
One of the lists was actually a Moon Stompy list in 3rd place.
Let me scroll down to that. Is that the Oklahoma again one? Yeah. So I think I played something very, very close to that for my challenge. I think I replaced the Dead Gone with a 4th Pyroblast, and I otherwise played that list or something within 1 or 2 cards.
But overall from this list, it looks like there's 4 Rug Delver in the top 16, 3 Eldrazi, and 2 Titan Stompy. I believe Goldfish is calling it Titanic Dryad, so I started doing that in my own personal spreadsheet as well. But those seem to be the big winners. And then just a couple days later, we had the Super Qualifier, which was won by Rich Callie on Rug Delver. So we saw Rich in the top 8 of the Legacy Challenge, and then 4 days later, won the Super Qualifier with Rug Delver.
So I've been hearing some talk on Twitter of like people saying that Rug Delver isn't all that good, maybe partially because of Oko or maybe partially because of Uro or something. And then I look at this and go like, what are you talking about? Delver's still great.
Yeah, so I've been playing a lot, as I mentioned, online. Up until Rich's first place finish, I had faced Rug Delver specifically 4 times since the Breach banning. It is now the deck that I've played against the most. So basically a week, not even a full week actually. We're recording on Tuesday night. I've now faced it 16 times, so that's 12 times in 1 week. Eldrazi is the deck that I faced the second most, which is 10. And then Death and Taxes, 4-color Loam, and TES are all tied at 3rd place, which is literally half the number that I've played against Rug Delver. So its metagame shares really picked up over the last week thanks to Rich.
Yeah, if you tell Delver players that Rug Delver is playable, they're in. Like, they're just waiting for an excuse to get on it. Like, and like a lot of just like Magic players, like people who have just pushed into their house, they're branching out into formats because they have more time that they wouldn't have had 3 weeks ago. Like, you tell like a modern player or like a pioneer player, like, hey, get into Legacy, try this Rug Delver deck. It appeals to the play style of a lot of people who think they're smart. Whether they are or aren't, like, I don't want to hold judgment, but like if you fancy yourself a like blue intellectual, like this just looks hot on paper, and it is hot. Like, it's super hot. The deck is great. So like we talked way back at the beginning of the show about Uro being bad for Delver, but like Pyroblast that guy. Just like let them cast their 3-mana growth spiral, what the fuck ever, and then after they fill their graveyard, spew their graveyard into recurring this thing, Pyroblast it. They don't draw a card. They have to refill their graveyard now. Like, Uro is not just like a 4-mana 6/6 that takes over the game. There's a lot of work that goes into that guy. And just Pyroblast, daze, force of will, you're dead. Like, Delver has the tools. And Rug Delver, it gets to be a Delver deck with Oko. We've been talking about like Delver decks and Oko decks, like they're kind of two different things. Like, there's the blue soup and then there's Delver, but like here's both right here in a tight little package for you. And the deck is great.
I also think that the sideboard for this deck is just like super, super sexy right now. It has so many slightly different overlapping, they're not necessarily haymakers, but like high impact cards. So you have like a Braid and Ancient Grudge and Oof and Borrower to attack like permanents from slightly different directions. And I feel like Rug Delver gets to improve a lot in many, many, many post-sideboard games.
Yes. Yeah, the Rug color shard has some of the spiciest sideboard options that you can get. Like, every time I choose to play Rug Delver in a tournament, I spend like the 48 hours before the event deciding which of my 77 cards I'm going to play. Like usually like 73 of them are locked in, and then I just go deep into like my soul for the last two. And like did I say 77? I meant 73. I don't know what I said. But like 73, like I have 5 cards that need to go into 2 slots at the end of the day, and it's just like soul crushing to find those slots because there's so many good sideboard cards.
So second place in the event was Romario Vidal with Doomsday. I don't know about the two of you, but I haven't really seen personally an uptick in Doomsday online. Right after the banning, I faced it twice, and then I faced it once this week, but a side tangent. My opponent spent over 10 minutes resolving Doomsday. This is unacceptable. Like, do you guys remember when Top was banned, and then they cited time constraints? 10 minutes on a Doomsday resolving. What? And then, like, when they, like, recently they talked about, like, I shouldn't say recently, it was within the last year, but Goblin Recruiter, and then they once again said time constraints. If time constraints are the issue, why is Doomsday legal? Like, I don't even think Doomsday should be banned. I think that they should unban Goblin Recruiter, but like, stacking your deck for 10 minutes? No. Like, in paper, I would have hounded them like a dog to play faster.
Well,
but that's not how Magic Online works.
There's the twist. So, on Magic Online versus in paper, like, in paper, of course that's not going to happen. Like, Sensei's Divining Top allowed many small legal game actions to consume the clock over the course of the match. Doomsday, if your paper Doomsday opponents like Dark Ritual Doomsday and then in the tank more than like 40 seconds, call a judge immediately. Like, even 40 seconds is generous. Like, they should know what their plan is. And like, I'm not above it. Like, I've gotten perceived game wins. I don't know if it actually mattered, but like against like a Storm player who like, they're like flipping for ad nauseum, and then they go into the tank about like, okay, should I stop? Should I start? And then I'm just like, judge, like mid ad nauseum. And the judge is like, okay, you need to make a play. And then they're like, fine. And then they like take too much damage, or they stop when they're not ready, or like post ad nauseum when they're holding 15 cards and trying to figure out what to do with them. Like, you don't get more time to figure out what to do with your 15 cards than I do to resolve my brainstorm. Like, that's just not how paper Magic is designed. And if you want to like be nice or like sporting or whatever word for allowing your opponent to abuse the clock on you want to use, that's fine. That's your prerogative. But like, it really, like on Magic Online, like we talked about this last week, I believe, where it's just like the philosophical debate of, is this my time I'm entitled to, or should I respect the person on the other side? But like chess clock versus shared round clock on Moto versus real life, totally different world. And I think Doomsday will be close to unplayable in real life in Paper Magic for that reason.
So it's funny you mentioned our conversation about the chess clock, because in my challenge this week, I had a Rug Delver opponent tank on almost every single decision I made or spell I cast. And then they timed out and I had 10 minutes on the clock and they asked for a concession. Then they're like, there's no way you're going to win this. But I wasn't the one that abused the clock and took all that time.
Get fucked is like the answer to that. Like, whatever, idiot. Like, you need, like, it's the same thing in real life. Like, the chess clocks just take so much stress out of a match of Magic. Like, when you are playing a game, like, I wish there was a world where, like, you could take your game actions like you do in real life, but have a chess clock. Because, like, having to click through, like, your Bomberman combo or, like, your Urza Thopter loop or whatever, like, that's going to take time, even if you're sitting there with your undivided attention on that game. Like, if I could, like, in real life, just, like, I'll make 1 billion mana ballista you for 1 billion, and that takes 1 second to do in real life versus, you know, the clicks on Moto. And I just wish there was some way to hybridize it, but there isn't, unfortunately. But you gotta be firm about your clock share in real life, because people will abuse it on you, whether intentionally or otherwise, and you just gotta get on it.
When we were getting new Magic Online features this week, the Magic Online Twitter was like, we're bringing you a feature that everyone's been asking for a long time. And, like, what we got was, like, the ability to see that Magic Online was live from the client, and then a whole bunch of new sounds. And I'm over here going, like, yeah, but what about the infinite loops?
Yeah, I'd like to
what
demonstrate
about some of the cards that don't work as intended on Magic Online still?
Yeah, how
what about the
replays?
Ability to open a treasure chest and then put the cards that you get directly into a trade binder?
Yeah, all of those things.
Let's not just crap on Magic Online.
I love it.
Phil,
it's still one of my drugs of choice. So
yeah, Magic Online is great.
Don't get
me wrong. Don't get me wrong. But I played an insane match. I was just like sitting watching TV, playing Magic Online the other day, and I played an insane match. And I wanted to film it because this match was worth doing like a full like YouTube video on just the back and forth of this game. And I went to the replays that I didn't know were broken, but apparently everyone who plays Magic Online normally does, but I have no reason to use them. But like, I would just like click like next. I would get like 15 minutes into navigating this game, and then suddenly like my Narset was on top of my deck and my Thoughtseize was in my opponent's hand, and I'm just like, wait, what happened? And then I was like, that was weird. And then I reset the client, restart my video, talk for another 15 minutes, and the same shit happened. And it's like, oh, replays are just broken. I get it. I've wasted 30 minutes of my life. So that was sad. And sorry to my YouTube followers that you didn't get that sweet analysis, because replays don't work. Continue with the list, Bryant.
Well, this next section is actually Phil's observations on Doomsday.
Okay. So this deck has been getting a lot of attention in the post-breach world, and some people are claiming that this might in reality be sort of like a tier 1 deck. A lot of this came after some of Romario's success this weekend, although people had already been, having some rumblings before that. I'm not really sure if Doomsday is there yet, but Doomsday used to be this meme deck that was played by, like, maybe less than 10 people, and the people who were into Doomsday had this like crazy primer or spreadsheet or something talking about all the various lines that you had to take. And now the deck, even if it isn't tier 1, it's not just a meme deck anymore. Like, there is very much something real there, I think.
Yeah, you know about the Stephen Menendian Doomsday File, right?
Yes, I think that's what I'm referring to without knowing the name.
Yes, Stephen Menendian for Vintage Doomsday. He basically made this like many page document. It's not a literal book. He wrote a literal book about the card Gush. Like you can find that book somewhere and read it if you want. But he did the same thing for Doomsday, and it's just many pages where it's just every situation that there could be. Where it's like it would be like, okay, your Black Lotus has been exiled. You know your opponent has Flusterstorm in hand, and they might also have Force of Will. It's like 10% that they have Force of Will. Here's a paragraph what pile to make there. And like he just did this for every situation that could exist. And that's the type of person that used to be interested in Doomsday. And Steven himself has said in the past, I don't think it's true anymore, but at one point he said that Doomsday is the best deck in Vintage, but nobody can play it well enough to play it. Like, I mentioned it last week, like he was in the Vintage Super League in the first season, like with Notepad up on his screen, just typing through his thought process for like 8 to 12 minutes at a time. And then like, okay. And then he would make his play, but you just can't do that in real life. We just talked about that a lot. I'm not going to get back into it, but yeah, that's the kind of like insanity that was required to be interested in Doomsday in the past.
I think Doomsday was actually pretty similar to how people treated Nick Fit. And I think both decks within the last year have gotten a lot of new tools, even to the point where like Nick Fit is reasonably viable now, as long as you're not someone looking to cast 9-mana dragons. Like, there's a competitive way to play Nick Fit now. Neoform your Veteran Explorer into Snapcaster Mage, flashback your Neoform, put Leovold into play on turn 2 as a 4/4 is like a very reasonable thing you can do. Plus, there's other lists now, like having Collector Oof as a green sun target makes your deck so much better against all the unfair decks, which is what Nick Fit struggled against. And I know we're supposed to be talking about Doomsday, but it's both decks were memes at one point, and they're both now like reasonable, like tier 2 to ish. I don't know. They're both fine.
Yeah, and like the big difference between the two there is that like if Nick Fit is good, it becomes like a solid tier 2 competitor. Like it's like occupies the same kind of space that like Titan Stompy or whatever does. Like I don't want to get into the weeds of which of those decks is actually better. Like, is it a meme to cast Primeval Titan? It might have been up 3 months ago, but it's not anymore. But so like Nick Fit, if it's good, becomes like a solid tier 2 choice. Doomsday, if it's good, breaks the format. So like the Doomsday's ceiling is so much higher. Like the Nick Fit nut draw of just like turn 1 Veteran Explorer, turn 2 therapy, like cast Pernicious Deed or whatever, like whatever it is they're doing, is like it's not as terrifying as like Dark Ritual kill you.
That's very fair. So I know we talked about it a little bit last week and how I said that I didn't think that Doomsday was as good as Blue-Green Omnitel. It's not won a big event. It's won a big event. I still think what I said is true. It's not that Doomsday's bad, and I think some people took that to heart. It's a completely fine choice. I just question whether or not it does anything better than Blue-Green Omni, and that's not something bad. Like, you can always play a different choice. You don't have to play the deck that might be better. You can play another choice. That is what a lot of people love about Legacy. There's still people out there that play Goblins, for example. It's not an awful choice. It's just like, is it the best thing within that strategy you can be doing? I'm not sure. So not having Veil of Summer is like something sort of crazy right now. It's just like Veil of Summer is one of the most powerful things you can be doing in the format. It's a combo deck that doesn't play Veil. Blue-Green Omni gets Veil. I do think that Doomsday is also getting something that we call Brewer's Advantage, where people don't really know how to play against it yet. People are playing cards like Deafening Silence or boarding in Leyline of the Void. Leyline of the Void does literal nothing against Doomsday. And people are just like auto sideboarding in 4. So with enough time, that will change. And the dedicated hate towards Doomsday will be more obvious and people won't be making sideboarding mistakes and things like that.
I stifle your Thassa's Oracle. GG.
Yeah, Stifle. Wow, up there with Carpet of Flowers in the stock market, the card stock market, the only stock market that's doing well at the moment. Like 1-drops, 1-drops that break blue mirrors is the is what you should be investing in right now.
I think another Doom's advantage that Doomsday has going for it is that it's really good, or at least acceptable, against a lot of commonly played hate cards. So, like, how much does Doomsday actually care about Athalia? All right, so they, like, Dark Ritual, land, and cast their Doomsday for 4 mana, and then it's just, like, Street Wraith, Street Wraith, Street Wraith, maybe an Edge of Autumn, kill you the next turn.
They usually play one of each, by the way. Like, that's become, like, the stock is, like, 1 Street Wraith, 1 Edge Autumn. But, yeah.
Yeah, I lost to a line something like that when I was playing Death and Taxes a week or so ago, so the lists were different and probably worse then. They're starting to get a little more polished now. But it's surprising how many common hate cards they can just get around.
Yeah. And because it only needs to use half of its life total, it does play Thoughtseize. It gets to play Force of Will, which a lot of combo decks do not get to do. Blue-Green Omni does, but and TES do not get to play Force of Will. Romario's list has both Leyline of the Void and Terminus on the sideboard. So there are ways around that. Plus, you get to play a higher converted mana cost, which is something a lot of other combo decks don't get to do. So it does do some things differently. One of the advantages of Doomsday. But you have to find why it works for you and why it's better than another choice.
And I think the easiest point of comparison here is to Blue-Green Omni. So you lose out on things like Veil of Summer, and you don't necessarily get to win the turn that you go off. Doomsday often ends up two-stepping it, where turn 1 or 2 might look like Dark Ritual Doomsday, and then turn 2 is the turn where they truly go for it and attempt to win the game.
Yeah, Doomsday also uses life total as a resource. So if you're a Delver deck and you're sitting on a Lightning Bolt and you'll know you'll get an attack step, maybe that's all you need. You allow them to resolve Doomsday and then you just kill them. Something Blue-Green Omni doesn't have to worry about. So not using life total as a resource is pretty huge. It's also more difficult to play. Like, not to upset Gerald James me, but it's pretty easy to cast Show and Tell. Doomsday is a little tougher to do. Especially for new people picking up the deck, you're going to have people taking 11 minutes to resolve a spell on Magic Online, or misplaying and casting the wrong, or naming the wrong card with their predict. Mistakes will happen.
For what it's worth, I think the newer Doomsday piles are probably easier than older Doomsday piles. That's the impression that I have based on the deck lists, not based on actually playing any games with Doomsday. So, like, take that with a grain of salt, but it looks easier than it used to be.
Yeah, like,
I'd probably agree with that.
Yeah, Thassa's Oracle was a big game changer for that. Like, you don't have to Doomsday and then generate 10 Storm also. Like, you just have to cast this creature. Though, I'm fairly confident this deck is just dead if Thassa's Oracle gets removed in some fashion. Like, if it gets, like, Jester's capped, or, like, if it's milled somehow, or, like, Thoughtseize Surgical. Like, I'm pretty sure the deck just can't beat that.
So I've noticed something a little weird. Some people are trying to cheat and only play one Thassa's Oracle. And then they'll cast Doomsday, like, trying to get concessions if it, like, they pitch it to Force. I think you almost have to play 2. But the downside of playing 2 is that it gets a lot worse if you're playing Divining Witch, I believe it's called. Because you want to name your Oracle and then mill your deck. But if you're playing 2 of them, you actually have to mill your deck twice in case you hit it the first time, which can be a little awkward.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that playing 1, at least in the main deck, I guess the sideboard of this winning list has 2 mentors in it, so that makes sense. They, like, basically board into miracles. There's Counterbalance, Monastery Mentor, Terminus, like, literal miracles out of the sideboard. Which is another thing that Blue-Green Omnitel can't do. Like, you don't get to pivot into a control deck where you need to be one. So that's a little spice. They have these Teferi Time Ravelers in the main anyway. It's just an Astrolabe control deck. So this is a big brain deck. Like, Bryant was talking about big brain just for, like, resolving the Doomsday. But then how do you sideboard? When your sideboard is just, like, literally a blue control deck. Like, how skinny do you go on the combo? Is it just out? Are you miracles now? Do you still keep in, like, 2 Doomsdays and the Oracle? Like, I don't know. Like, what do your piles look like post-board? So this is going to be a very hard deck to play. And I'm just going to reiterate, I don't know who is going to be big brain enough or who's going to do enough work to actually play this in paper proficiently.
All right, so Phil was pretty shocked about an event that happened in Japan, the God of Legacy by Haruya, however you say it. I don't know. I can't talk. But it was a paper event. And so apparently Japan is done with the coronavirus. They don't have to worry about it anymore. But Phil was really excited because Alurin won the event while playing Oko Thief of Crowns.
And Uro. We can't forget that either.
Well, Uro works incredibly well with Cavern Harpy. It both draws a card and gains life.
Yeah,
that's
it's
everything
so
you
disgusting.
Want.
Yeah, that is a sick one. Like, I have not broken down this list in my brain yet, but yeah, Uro plus Cavern Harpy plus Alurin is GG. You just draw your deck, gain 2 life every time you iterate. Like, that's pretty gross.
No more parasitic Strix?
Not needed.
Yeah.
It's still in there, but...
Yeah, like, you do still need it to win the game.
I mean, most of the time, that many cards and that much life effectively wins it anyway.
I mean...
I guess you don't always want to give them another turn.
Yeah, like, the deck doesn't really have a backup plan. Like, do you just, like, gain all that life, draw all those cards, and then pass with Uro in play and 7 cards in hand? Like, I would rather just for one deck building slot, like, put the Strix in there, get the game over.
I'm just wondering if there's a better win condition you could play. Something that isn't so bad on its own.
Rishadan Cut Purse is a card that Alurin has played in the past. It's in the Pirate Stompy cycle. It's the common. Like, when it arrives, I think it's a 2 or 3 drop. When it arrives, your opponent pays 1 or sacks a permanent. So, like, you can just, like... You can loop that instead and just, like, leave them with nothing and pass with, like, lethal attackers and a handful of Force of Wills. But, like, is that card better than Parasitic Strix on its face? It's unclear.
I just wonder if, like, through power creep, if there's, a reasonable card they could play on their own that isn't so bad.
So let me tell you about Alurin players. They're a lot like Doomsday players, but not as crazy because the deck's not as hard to play. But every set, like the way that you do for the Epic Storm of just like, oh, is that card playable? I'll try it. I'll put it on the list. Alurin players are doing that too. And if a 3-drop or less was printed that killed the opponent more efficiently than Parasitic Strix, they'd know about it.
Okay, that's very fair.
To be fair, the Alurin players have also gotten a lot of new toys. Like, looking at this deck list, they've gotten Brazen Borrower, Gilded Goose, Icefang, Coatl, Uro, Oko, Force of Negation, Plague Engineer. What the heck is a Thassa Deep Dwelling?
That's the Blinky Thassa.
Oh.
Yeah, that's the new one. That's got to be a sideboard plan. I don't know what's going on there.
Yeah, that's in the sideboard. All right, I learned about a new Magic card today.
What I can't believe is that this event got 146 players during a pandemic.
I have thoughts about that I'll probably just save for myself because I'm sure this podcast is already running long, but we're not nearly done talking.
Yeah,
Buckle up.
Yeah, eternal. But yeah, so so like I don't know the state of things in Japan. I don't want to be a complete savage on a country and government that I know little about. I mean, they are a small island, but I don't know. I struggle to believe a 146 player paper Magic event was responsible in today's world, but I hope that it was. And good job for running this if it was safe, and shame on you if it was not safe.
If you're into spicy deck lists, there is like super spicy, all the chili pepper deck list that got 3rd or 4th in this event. That's like a mono black Storm Reanimator that was called Grizzle Shoot somewhere. That plays Magus of the Will, Shallow Grave, as well as
Isn't this just Tin Fins?
No, it's not Tin Fins because it's missing the Children of Corliss package.
Oh, okay. It has 3 Grave Titans in the main instead.
Yeah, and Lake of the Dead. So that
but don't forget that the version with Magus of the Desire is not Tin Fins. It's Bizarro Stormy, or all 3 Tin Fins players on the internet will attack you on Twitter.
Listen, let me tell you my experience with Tin Fins. So we have a local guy. His name is Cameron, and he either plays Grixis Dakfaden, Tesserator, or Tin Fins. Like, 2 decks on the complete opposite end of the spectrum, and when you sit down, it's impossible to keep a hand, because it's just like, well, do I want these 3 Force of Wills, or do I want 0 Force of Wills? And you never know. Is Wasteland going to be unbeatable or complete trash? And he's done a good job metagaming all of us for a person who only owns 2 decks. So, good job, Cameron. And I lose a lot because I keep hands that are good against Tesserator.
I had a local player in Roanoke. He was one of my roommates for a while who would go back and forth between playing Miracles and Tin Fins, and that similarly got people real good.
So I think it's like kind of a shame that Magus of the Will costs both 3 to cast and 3 to activate. They could have made that, because you have to wait a turn in order to activate it, they could have reduced the cost on, like, 6 mana is a lot and a turn.
Yeah, it should cost 0.
That'd be
0
totally
mana,
safe.
0 mana 3/3 with 2 black tap cast Yogwill.
Exactly.
I would put that deck in, or put that card in a lot of decks.
It's still seeing Legacy play, though, so, like, here we are. Even though, like, its stats aren't maybe the greatest, it made it, and 146 players is nothing to sneeze at. Like, that's a good-sized event.
Yeah, well, I mean, your plan is not to cast this thing, it's to shallow grave it and go around again. So, I imagine someone somewhere has won a game where they cast, like, they got, like, Force of Will, Thought Seized, and then they're just like, okay, Magus, go, and then won on the following turn.
It's sort of interesting if you look at the rest of the deck list. Bug Control, Death and Taxes, Dragon Stompy, Eldrazi, Painter, and then there's an Omni Show in there. Like, these are all decks that we've talked about over the last, like, hour or so. If you look at them, they're all bigger decks or prison-esque decks. You're not seeing a lot of, like, I guess, you're not seeing traditional Legacy decks in here. Like, we haven't said the word Stoneblade once tonight. You're seeing a lot of decks that go large here. Phil, as the person that plays these sort of decks, why is that?
So, a lot of the format right now is based around 3 mana cards, like Oko and Uro being really important ones, but to a lesser extent, things like Knight of the Reliquary are also super important as well. Blood Moon, Magus of the Moon, lots of things of that nature. Or things that are kind of being cast at what would be 3 mana in other decks, like Thought-Knot Seers. And the ability to go above what a lot of other decks are doing is really valuable right now. So the ability to just make something like Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger that these decks have a lot of trouble answering, or do something on cast, or the ability to go wider than someone by playing something like Alurin is, I think, pretty valuable right now. And a lot of these decks that are doing these, like, go real big things are also supplemented by things like Chalice of the Void, which means you're not just folding to all of the combo decks.
So there's another point that you subtly mentioned there, and that's the resurgence of Abrupt Decay coming back because all these 3 mana cards. That's why you're seeing Alurin and Bug Control in that Bug Zenith deck. Abrupt Decay is probably the best it's been since the Miracles era. I don't know if anyone here would disagree with me, but, like, to me, it seems like this is a peak time, and it's like during the heyday of Veil of Summer. That's how good Abrupt Decay is right now, is that when Veil of Summer is everywhere, people still are finding room in their deck for Abrupt Decays because it's just so good against everything else.
Yep. I have nothing to add. I've been super
Abrupt
impressed
Decay
by
is
that card.
great. Yeah, when I played the Titan Stompy deck when it was, like, first out, my whole experience, like, my big criticism was, like, this deck doesn't do anything except cast Chalice and then cast Titan. Like, it needs something in between. And now 4 Abrupt Decay just seems to be stock. And the people who kept working on the deck after that point figured it out too. And yeah, Abrupt Decay is just excellent right now.
So I think that's kind of all that we want to say about the Japanese event. So we have one more Moto Legacy Challenge, and that was from 330. That was taken down by a 4-color Delver list. I didn't particularly find that all that interesting, but I think there's 2 super notable things from the event. Number 1 is the 5th place Delver deck list. It's a blue-red Delver deck list that features accumulated knowledge, which kind of blew my mind.
Well, Tony Scaponi's a madman. Like, I don't think... Like, Tony Scaponi will play Counterbalance and Stifle in the same list. Like, this person likes to do their own thing, and Legacy's full of people like that. So, while, like, AK in your Delver deck is spicy and it gives you a long game, and that's what a lot of Legacies become recently, I wouldn't put too much stock in this. Like, you'll notice there's also Aria Flames in the sideboard. And then the 7th place Delver deck looks almost exactly like what, what's their name? H.A. Kaiser won previously with, where it's the Grixis Delver list that just goes bigger against other big decks with Painful Truths. And, like, Bedlam Revelers and Dread Hordes. So we're seeing a little bit of a throwback here.
I would definitely rather have Painful Truth in my sideboard than AK in the main deck of my Delver deck. Like, for sure. And like, the slots to make room for these AKs in this Delver list, there's one Dreadhorde Arcanist in this deck. There's one True Name Nemesis. Like, the threats have gotten pretty wonky. Like, you know, like, Dreadhorde Arcanist plus Ponder draws as many cards as your first 2 AKs. Like, and the selection built in, like, might just be better. So, I'm not sold on this package, but it is certainly spicy.
I'm more scared of Dreadhorde Arcanist than most cards in Legacy. Like, I know Oko Uro are getting a lot of the attention right now, but every time Arcanist hits play on turn 2, I'm just secretly going like, oh god, have I just lost? Like, if they have a counterspell, can I possibly come back from this? That card's so impressive.
Yeah, that is the snowballiest. Like, that card might be more snowbally than Oko, which is a bold statement because Oko is the king of snowballs. But if they had a snowball fight, I think Arcanist might win it. Though Oko does have the secret technology of turning his opponent's his snowball enemy into an elk. So I guess Oko would win heads up, but like, if my opponent was going to resolve one or the other uncontested, I feel like I would have more game against an Oko a lot of the time. I don't know. Arcanist is definitely a 2019 Magic card with the best of them.
So if you look at the 2nd place list here, it's Titan. And you'll notice that they are not playing Trinisphere or Mindbreak Trap in the board. That's interesting to me as a combo player. Their list is ultra fair. And I think that's pretty interesting. They're even playing a Corsair Crewfix as a 5th copy of Dryad, essentially. And it's just a lot of 2/4s in this Delver world that we live in where Lightning Bolt is king. So I find that to be like pretty interesting. And other than that, you'll notice there's even more Eldrazi in the top 8 and 16 of this event. Eldrazi right now, if you look on Goldfish, is actually the deck that's in first for metagame share. And I think it's like gone underneath the radar a little bit. And Eldrazi seems to be back. They haven't really gotten that many tools outside of Once Upon a Time. Maybe that was just the added push it needed to be a little bit more consistent. Pair that with Elvish Spirit Guide instead of Simian Spirit Guide, and they have a real deck now. Maybe that's all they needed.
So the Once Upon a Times make your first 3-ish turns significantly more consistent. And against a lot of decks, that's what really matters, is just like being able to somewhat consistently go turn 1 Mimic, turn 2 Thought-Knot Seer, turn 3 some other follow-up play, hopefully Reality Smasher if things are going really well. And most decks just can't beat that.
I will say this.
Go ahead.
I wish that the Mishra's Factories in the list were something like, what's it called? The Grassland Painland? Brushland. Because then you could hardcast your Once Upon a Times, and I think you could even hardcast your Spirit Guides in a pinch, which is something that deck has to do sometimes. And I think that being able to hardcast your Spirit Guides would effectively be the same as Mishra's Factories most of the time. I don't know. It's just like, against me and matches that I watch, Mishra's Factory is often not that great anyway. So I'd rather have more consistency with the cards that I'm already splashing for.
So the difference between having, like, let's say 3 green sources in your deck and 0 green sources in your deck, well, like, outside of the Spirit Guides, is relatively small. So I had that same thought when I first saw the deck lists, and I think I made the same swap. The list that I started with might have been playing Caracas or something like that instead. And then I realized that most of the time I couldn't line up those cards at the same time since I have like literally 0 card draw or manipulation in the deck outside of Matter Reshaper dying and the Once Upon a Times in the first place. So, like, I agree with you in theory, but in practice it just, like, mathematically wasn't working out a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would agree. Like, as someone who has Terminus and Supreme Verdicted a lot of Eldrazi players, the fact that they get to just use extra mana in that mid-game situation to plunk me for 2 or 4 is probably better than, like, casting Once Upon a Time. Because if we settle into that game, like, if you commit to trying to out-cantrip the blue deck in a mid-game situation, you're going to lose. But if you just, like, keep your velocity pedal to the metal, like, get in with your lands, that's probably better.
And just talking about another deck that's been really popular here, the Titan Stompy deck also put up 3 results in the top 16 here. I'm going to be honest with you, when I first saw the Titan deck, I was really excited because I thought I had another meme deck list to play. And then it was like, there's a result. There's 3 results. There's 3 more results. So there might actually be something real to this shell, and it might actually be a real contender. I don't know if that's true long term, but at least in the short term, I think this is a deck that should be on your radar.
So we've talked about everything except this 4th place deck. Have you seen this deck? By Novat28, 4 Karn the Great Creator, 3 Oko Thief of Crowns, 2 Brazen Borrower, 4 Emery Lurker of the Loch, 2 Uro, 3 Urza. Oh my god. Like, I think your title of 2019.deck was granted a little early in the cast. Like, look at this thing. Yeah, this is a hot little pile. There's a Simic Signet in this Legacy deck, that top forward, the challenge.
I like how you left out Force of Will and Chalice of the Void like they weren't worth mentioning.
Well, they're not from 2019. I was just reading cards from 2019. But yeah, Force of Will and Chalice of the Void. So that's like the real Legacy plan here. Like that. So it's a Stompy deck that gets Force of Will, and that's bananas. Like, I'm really into this list. I'm seeing it for the first time as I scroll through the list to talk about it here, and I have already saved it to my computer to play it in the future. Like, this is my jam.
Wow. The average card quality of this deck is absolutely absurd.
Yeah, there's like Simic Signet and then all 10s. Just 10 out of 10 plus Simic Signet.
The Simic Signet probably, like, is totally good in this shell, though, since you have so many different mana requirements. Like, you have the green-blue of Uro and Oko, while you also have, like, 4 mana for Karn, blue-black for Baleful Strix. Like, it's probably fine to good. I don't know what your other mana rock options are, but
I mean, if we walk it back to my dude Cameron, who I mentioned earlier, with his Tezzerator for life, except when I'm on Tinfin's lifestyle, Talisman of Dominance is a card that I've seen cast in Legacy a lot, and there is now the Talisman cycle is the full 10 combo colors after Modern Horizon, right? So like, there's got to be a blue-green Talisman. Is that better than Signet? Like, Signet's a little awkward to get online, but once it's online, it's less painful. So, Signet might actually be better. If you don't... I guess the appeal of Talisman over Signet would be if you're like, turn 1, Ancient Tomb, this artifact, and then do something with your 1 mana. Which this... Right. So, like, Talisman could cast Emery, but Signet will save you a lot of damage as the game goes on. So, I don't know. That's one of those deck building decisions that will exist for someone who wants to put some work into this deck. It might be me. Spoilers.
I'll look forward to that video. So, as far as the Titan Stompy deck, I think that deck is good, but I think it is still in the process of evolution. So between the time that the last episode was recorded and this one, Abrupt Decay in the main deck has become much more common, and you're starting to see people mess around with things like the number of Mox Diamonds that are in the deck. I think the deck started out with 4 Raymond Excavators, and some of the lists that I'm seeing now only play like 1 of them. I've seen all sorts of crazy things in leagues. I've seen Titania main deck, I've seen Castle Garenbrig main deck, and I've seen Twitter screenshots where people are trying to like jam Uro and Oko into that shell while keeping the rest of it intact.
From a combo perspective, it can certainly be pretty scary. I face lists with, obviously they all play Chalice main deck, but then there's lists that play Trinisphere with no Mindbreak in the board. And then there's lists that play Mindbreak, Trap, and Force of Vigor in the board. They all tend to play Leyline of the Void. Like, it's pretty scary for a combo deck because all of these cards are haymakers against combo. But at the same time, they beat a lot of the fair decks by going larger. And if you're able to do both, that's a dangerous combo in Legacy. So that's one thing that sort of concerns me about the second place list is that I feel like compared to most lists that I've seen recently, they're actually a little bit light. They only have the 4 Chalice in the main and then 4 Leyline in the board. They're not playing Trinisphere. They're not playing Mindbreak. No Force of Vigor.
Yeah, it kind of feels like that's like the result of like, I don't want to say inbred metagaming, but kind of something of that nature, where this deck list is very much gearing to fight the fair fight. And Vraska Golgari Queen is a great example of that, where like that exists to minus and abrupt decay something like an Oko, and then live to fight another day. But yeah, as a whole, I agree that this deck list definitely feels a little bit light in terms of combo hate. I wouldn't be super comfortable registering that exact 75 for an event like next weekend, for example.
Yeah, so like this, I wouldn't call it inbred metagaming as much as just metagaming. Like I think this is just a classic example of like I don't think I'm gonna play against Storm, and if I do, like you can either punt the matchup or you do still have Oof, Chalice, and Leyline, and just hope it works. So we talked about this in the last cast, I believe, where we were talking about like, is it worth sideboarding for Storm in paper events? Like if you're a huge dog and it would take a large sideboard commitment, and there's like 10 good Storm players on the planet, like is it worth doing? Obviously, on Magic Online, where Storm is huge, I am not comfortable with this list, but I think this is a pretty smart list. I would be comfortable in a paper tournament with this. I would not take it into a Moto Challenge, though. So,
I think this was an awesome deck for a specific tournament.
Yes, the tournament where you dodge Storm.
If I could not get Black Red Reanimator in round 1. Whew. But one thing that I'd like to point out is like I listed all those cards. I didn't mention Oof. I didn't mention Abrupt Decay, and I didn't mention Wasteland. So those are other edges this deck does have. It's just that those cards are mostly less effective other than Oof, which it can be a haymaker, but it's pretty bad against the other version of Storm, which doesn't necessarily need its artifacts as much.
Yeah, but it needs its graveyard a lot more. So there's like pressure points in both directions. This is not pants down. It's just, it doesn't have any like bangers like Trinisphere.
And when everything else just goes south, Field of the Dead can just save your ass. Like, I've gone from thinking, all right, I have this game locked down, to then there were suddenly 8 zombies in play. And I just didn't know what happened.
All right, so it seems like we're winding down here. Anyone have any final thoughts?
Magic's great. A lot of people are still kind of focusing on ban Oko, ban Veil, ban Astrolabe. But I think we have a super dynamic and interesting format that is super cool if you are a brewer right now. There's a lot of exploration going on, and I've been having a blast.
Yeah, I do think we're bumping into the kind of like grumpy old man mentality that the vintage community is prone to, where it's like, this isn't how it was when I remember, like, so it's bad, even though it's actually fine in reality. So like the numbers on Oko are like I know Bob Wong posts his like stats about like the number of decks Oko is in, and like I even got into that conversation because he like had like the percentage of decks likely to play Oko that are playing Oko, and then I was like, what about the stats on the decks unlikely to play Oko, like elves or goblins, because Oko is showing up in those decks too, like sometimes as a meme, but sometimes as actually good. But like, what were the stats on Jace the Mind Sculptor in blue decks for the last decade. Like, are we just in a shift where 3-mana is the new 4, or is this actually unhealthy? And I don't think we're at a point where calling for bans is the answer to that question.
Preach.
Yep. I mean, I hate playing against Oko a lot of the time, but I am not pro Oko ban at this time, despite the horrible, awful things it does to all of my hate pairs.
Right. So, like, the talking about, like, what is bannable versus what you personally don't like is a totally different conversation. And, like, Breach was bannable. Like, the absolute shit stomping that Breach put on this format for the time it existed versus, like, this 3-mana sorcery speed kind of powerful thing. Bummer. Now I'm gonna have to slog through this game and make lots of small decisions. Or just combo over the top if you're Bryant Cook. Like, there's responses to these things that, like, play Pyroblast, play Tendrils of Agony, like, play Oko of your own and learn how to do combat math. Like, there's a lot of play to the card Oko. And I think it's just different than Legacy was 2 years ago, but I'm not convinced it's broken.
I am so mad at Phil for opening up a can of worms when we were trying to close this out.
Eternal glory!
Eternal glory!
All right. Well, everyone, thank you for listening. This was episode 20 of the Eternal Glory podcast. Make sure to check out Brian's YouTube comment at BoshNRoll on YouTube, Phil's at ThrabenU University, and mine at MTG The Epic Storm. Stay healthy, and